Can't really tell. Oh, there we go. Thank you, Esgy.
All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for attending today's doctoral consortium. My name is Dorothy Carter. I'm an associate professor of psychology at the University of Georgia. And my research focuses on leadership and teams, but I use kind of advanced analytic approaches like social network analysis and various other things. So I've been a part of the research methods division for a while, and now I'm the representative at large. We've got a really fantastic lineup of speakers today, as well as throughout the rest of the sessions. And before I introduce today's speakers, I thought I'd introduce Dr. Larry Williams, who can speak a little bit more about karma, which is very tightly connected with the research methods division. And then we're going to watch a quick video created by our division chair, Daniel Beal, that'll kind of give you a little bit more of an overview about the research methods division for those of you who aren't particularly that familiar. So Larry, why don't you just introduce yourself and talk a little bit about karma?
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. And I am Larry Williams, the director of karma. And it's a real treat to be with you this morning as we kick off not only another version of the Research Methods Division Consortium, but also another example of the partnership with the Research Methods Division and karma, which has been going on for quite a while. So it's a real pleasure. I won't take time. You probably know about karma and what we do. And so we are in the process of registration is open for next year's institutional membership program. We've got another great set of webcast lectures. We also are expanding last year's efforts at the topic interest groups to include 8 topical areas that we will be meeting regularly. But what I particularly want to mention is something that we're very excited about, and we call it our PhD Prep Series. And so this will be a series of 6 events, live Zoom events that'll be delivered in the upcoming academic year that focus specifically on research methods, education needs of doctoral students from basically the time they enter the program to the time they complete their dissertation. So keep your eyes open for information about that, and good luck for everybody. And just want to share sort of a bit of hope and sunshine as we look forward to things hopefully returning to normal. So good luck. Thank you for working with us, and let us know how we can better serve y'all. Thank you, Dorothy.
Thank you so much, Larry. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen, and we'll watch this short video. It's about 10 minutes, and then we'll jump into today's presenters. Okay, can everyone see Daniel Beal's face?
Yes.
Great.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 2021 Research Methods Division Karma Doctoral Student and Junior Faculty Consortium. My name is Dan Beal, and I am the Division Chair-elect for the Research Methods Division, the Academy of Management. And so allow me to welcome you. I have prepared a few words to kind of introduce everyone to the Research Methods Division, as well as to the events of the consortium. And so let me just go ahead and proceed with that. All right, now that my slides are up, let's look at a little bit of the details on the consortium. So as you probably already know, there are 4 sessions over 2 weeks. We have over 240 registered participants from 27 different countries. And you'll also note that the majority of these participants are not Research Methods Division members. And that's part of the reason why I'm having this introduction and why the Research Methods Division co-sponsors this consortium is to encourage students and junior faculty to join Research Methods Division. And you may not realize this, but the divisions within the Academy of Management gain several benefits, many benefits, in fact, from having a lot of members. And one of those, as it says here, is that it impacts our ability to provide key elements to the program for the Academy of Management. In particular, for research methods, that's the professional development workshops, as well as sessions. And those is sort of what we pride ourselves on, one of the events that we feel is most helpful to the Academy. And the more members we have, the more of those we can do. And obviously, the greater the reach. So here's my plug for those of you who are not Research Methods members to consider. I'll come back to a little bit of why you might consider Research Methods to be one of your home bases. But first, let me go forward and thank the consortium committee members. So this year, Jason Huang and Jeremy Dawson are co-chairing the consortium. They're putting it together, organizing everything, making it run smoothly. So I can't thank them enough. Also, Dorothy Carter, who's the Research Methods Division representative at large, has been very helpful in putting it together, moderating one of the sessions, and allowing things to run smoothly. We also have a great slate of Research Methods Division student representatives: Andrew Blake, Sydney Reichert, Justin Jones, and Isabel Gilmore. And of course, Larry Williams, who is the head of Karma, so to speak. He's been this has been his brainchild for many years, and he's been exceedingly helpful in coordinating things with Research Methods Division and sponsoring innumerable events on his own and with many collaborators. So thanks to all of you. Just to give you a little overview of what's in store over the next couple of weeks, we have 4 primary sessions that play out this week and then next week. And so I'm not going to read through all of that here. You probably have access to this information on your own. But I did want to point out that we have a wide variety of topics that are of interest to people from all areas of management. And it looks to be a fantastic set of sessions. So there's week 1 as managing and designing your dissertation or large research project, as well as innovative approaches to collecting and sourcing data. Week 2 has advances in data analysis approaches, and then clearing methodological hurdles in the publication process, where the moderator, Jim John, is joined by a great group of senior associate editors at some of our premier journals. Okay, moving forward a little bit, which brings us to what does the Research Methods Division provide? So here's a little primer, just to kind of introduce us, let you know what we do, how we help out our members, as well as the Academy at large. So first of all, Research Methods Division has seen itself as a complement to discipline-based divisions. And so all of the other divisions of the Academy of Management have some substantive area of interest. And the thing that makes research methods unique is that all of them rely on research methods. And so as a result, as it says, we aspire to be everyone's second division. And I should also add that that's not entirely true, because there's a good chunk of members of the Research Methods Division who think of it as their primary division. They conduct research on research methodology. And so that, in combination with a lot of other discipline-based divisions, allows us to serve many people. So as a service division, we strive to incorporate perspectives from multiple divisions and interest groups. So more so than perhaps any other division, we co-sponsor symposia as well as PDWs with other divisions. There's a lot of overlap. I think you'll probably see RM next to many more of the items in the agenda for your Academy of Management than you will a lot of other divisions, no matter where you are based. So as a result of that, the paper sessions and other division activities incorporate research being done across the entire Academy. And that's really great, because it makes us a very diverse division. We have lots of different interests, lots of different approaches to methodology. There's plenty of qualitative, quantitative, micro, macro, however you want to divide things up. Research methods has something to add. So as you can see by the last bullet there, the Academy's 2019 survey found that 83% of research methods members reported being satisfied, very satisfied, or extremely satisfied. So we like to think that we do a lot for both our members and the Academy. One way in which we do this is through our online resources. So some of you may be aware that there's a very active discussion board called Research Methods Network, or RMNet. It's rated as one of the most consistently valuable benefits of being a member for the Research Methods Division. And on there, you'll find top experts on pretty much every topic you can imagine. And even if there's not a top expert in a particular area, they know where to find it, and they know how to deliver that information. And they're very easygoing about it. It's, anybody can post a question on there. There's no rules. It's not like cross-validated or something like that. And so as a result, it's a very approachable location where you can find information. In addition, we have an extensive division website that offers, amongst other things, syllabi and example materials for methods courses, which could be of great value, particularly to doctoral students and junior faculty, as well as the measures chest. And the measures chest is a developing resource where we add lots of existing measures that can be pulled from existing publications and collected in one location for all to access who are members of Research Methods Division. Another thing that we contribute to the Academy, as I mentioned before, are the professional development workshops. Is another opportunity that our members seem to really like. Those occur primarily just before the main academic sessions for the Academy, but sometimes they bleed into the main days of the other academic sessions, but mostly at the beginning part. But they focus on lots of different topics. And so some of them emphasize classic topics. We have some here. These are taken from this year's Academy. So we have one on social network analysis, necessary condition analysis, lots on qualitative dissertation and qualitative research in general, as well as some more cutting edge topics. So there's one session that's occurring this year that's focused on indigeneity, and another one that focuses on, focuses on multi-level linguistic analysis. So lots of different topics. In prior years, we've covered all kinds of things. I know I remember from the year that I worked at the PDWs, there were things like Bayesian analysis and dynamic structural equation modeling. So there's a lot of different opportunities for you to gain either basic knowledge of a very common technique or more cutting edge analysis. So the last component of that is that there's consistently, I think, I'm not even sure going back how many years, but many, many years, we've always had a qualitative and a quantitative Ask the Expert session where a high level group of experts are brought together and you can go to them and with whatever your questions are, ask one of these experts and they'll give you their time. And so it's a very valuable session for a lot of doctoral students and junior faculty. So finally, there's a broader community of scholars with whom you get to interact if you're a member of Research Methods Division, including this event, the Doctoral Student and Junior Faculty Consortium. You get to interact, as I said, with presenters from around the world. I realize that you cannot technically interact with me right now, but that's because I think it's the middle of the night where I am while you're watching this. But under more normal circumstances, I'd be happy to interact with you, and please feel free to reach out to me at any time with any questions you might have. But be that as it may, there's lots of opportunities to mingle, interact, and connect with research methods experts that are members of RMD. And we meet typically at Academy Management. There's a variety of socials and receptions where there's lots of open discussion about research methods topics. Another community of scholars is from the journal Organizational Research Methods and the Consortium for the Advancement of Research Methods and Analysis, CARMA. Both of those are tightly connected to RMD. Lots of collaboration across those different organizations, and it's very fruitful. So it's a nice high visibility source for methodological developments, as well as presenting a lot of opportunities for tutorials and other learning opportunities. And so that's essentially all I have. Hopefully, for those of you who are not currently Research Methods Division members, you'll consider adding us to your slate. And I hope everyone has a lovely rest of the consortium.
Okay, so hopefully everyone got the take-home message there. Join Research Methods Division as your second area if you haven't already. I've personally been a member of Research Methods. I mean, Jeremy's on the call too. Thanks for organizing everything. You can. Jeremy, if you want to say a couple words about who you are and your experience with Research Methods.
Sure. So I've been a member of the Research Methods Division since I first joined the Academy of Management in, I think, 2003. So 18 years, and it has been wonderful. I have really, really enjoyed it, partly for all the benefits that Dan mentioned in his little video there, partly because it's a great community of scholars. And even though we're not doing it in person this year, the Research Methods Division meeting and social events at the annual meeting are usually the best there are, and definitely the most fun you can have in those kind of conference centers. So do join up if you haven't already. Come along. You get to meet so many great people. I will always remember, meeting some of my early academic heroes that first time, including Larry, and feeling, wow, this is great. This is where I want to be. So do come and join us.
Yeah, absolutely. Agreed on the fun for sure. So today we're kicking off our excellent lineup of doctoral consortium sessions. And today's topic is designing your large research project or dissertation, and designing or developing your career path, kind of broadly defined. We have three really excellent presenters that I'm very excited about, who are going to talk about their perspectives on this topic from a wide variety of disciplinary or methodological approaches. We've got micro, macro perspectives, qualitative, quantitative approaches. So we're going to try to kind of compile a variety of perspectives on how do we develop and design our dissertation, large research project, develop our career path. So first up, we will have Dr. Kaifeng Jiang, Associate Professor of Management and Human Resources. Kaifeng's research focuses on the effects of human resource management practices on employee, team, and organizational outcomes. Next up, we'll have Dr. Laura Sande, who's an assistant professor of organizational behavior at UNC Chapel Hill. And Laura's research focuses on understanding the meaning of work and how it develops over time. Super interesting. And then we'll have Dr. Tim Hubbard, who's an assistant professor of management and organization at Notre Dame. And Tim's research focuses on strategic leadership with an emphasis on behavioral strategies. So again, we have this great kind of combination of perspectives, micro, macro, qualitative, quantitative. And so what we're going to do today is each of these presenters will talk for around 15 minutes. We're flexible here. If it goes on longer or shorter, that's fine. And we'll have time for a couple of questions for each presenter individually. What I'm going to ask you all to do is, if you have questions during one of the presenters' presentations, just go ahead and put it into chat, and then we can coordinate a couple of questions per person after each talk. And then what we're going to do after the three presenters give their background and information is we're just going to open it up for more of a panel-based discussion. I have some questions prepared to ask these scholars, and then we can open it up for, we don't have to get to all of my questions. I want to make sure that we get the questions that you all are interested in finding out about answered. That's the top priority here. And so I know that it's a big group. We have like almost 100 people on the call, but I want to try to make it as kind of informal and get to know each other as possible. So what we'll do, and I'll remind everybody about this once we get here, is You can put your question into chat if you have one, and then I'll call on you and say, okay, Jason, please say your question, and then that way we can kind of introduce ourselves that way. All right, sound good? Okay, so Kaifeng, I think you're up first if you want to.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
So let me share my screen with you first. Can everybody see my screen now? Okay, very good. And first of all, many thanks to Dorothy's introduction, and also I want to thank Jason Huang, and who's not here, I guess, and for inviting me. And also, it's my great pleasure to meet Dr. Jeremy Donaldson, and I use your interaction plot a lot in my own research, and it's my great honor to finally see you here. I personally have benefited a lot from research methods division and karma since I was a doctoral student. So I'm very glad that I have this opportunity to give back and share some of my experiences about conducting research and managing academic career. And I have learned from Dorothy that we have a very diverse group of participants for today's consortium in terms of research disciplines ranging from psychology to OBHR and strategy, or maybe even international business. So I want to briefly introduce my background so you can evaluate to what extent what I will be sharing with you later could be applied to your situation. So I got my PhD from School of Management and Labor Relations at Rutgers University, and my major is Industry Relations and Human Resources. But my first academic job was at University of Notre Dame, and we joked around a little bit in the beginning of the session. So I actually met Tim when he interviewed there, but we did not overlap at Notre Dame because I left for OSU. And so I only got the experience of working in the business school, which may have different requirements and expectations for faculty members from other schools like psychology college or public administration school, right? So for example, my college, the primary expectation on me is to conduct high quality research and get it published in top tier OBHR journals. And the college does not require faculty members to apply for research funding or evaluate faculty members based on that. So my sharing about research is basically about conducting research for journal publications. And then in terms of research interest, as Dorothy mentioned, my primary interest is strategic human resource management. So I'm interested in everything about HR systems, especially about the antecedent and the consequences of HR systems at different levels analysis, but also do some research on other related OBHR topics like climate, creativity, leadership, work teams, turnover, and also do meta-analysis. So I have several publications using meta-analysis. And in addition to doing all those kind of research, I also help journals to review articles. So I review a lot of articles for those journals. I do some service works like Dorothy and other people here, and do the professional services to Academy and SIOP. So especially about HR division. So this is about me. You can keep this information in mind, and when you listen to what I'm going to share next. All right, so I think designing research project is related to managing career paths because, and depending on what research you do and how productive you are, and you may choose different career paths. And your further career paths may also influence what resources you can get for your future research projects, right? But I think both of them are closely based on your scholarly identity, or people say research identity, which refers to who you are now and who you want to be as a scholar in your field in the future. So I believe that people can really benefit from establishing a clear scholarly identity in the early stage of their career. And of course, your identity can also change over time. But if you can have a clear identity in the early stage, it can give you some advantages. So for example, you can it can help you to advertise and promote yourself in the job market. I know some of you may be on the job market right now, and help you to find a placement that provides a good fit with your identity. It can also help you to build some collaborations with other scholars if they know that you are an expert on certain topics, and then you can help them to finish their projects. And you may also get invitations for conferences and presentations. So all of this may promote your personal reputation and even help you for the future tenure or promotion process. So depending on who you are and who you want to be in the future, so there are several questions you may need to consider when you design your research projects. For example, and what topics do you want to study? And do you want to follow the mainstream and to study some popular topics? Or do you want to propose a brand new construct and create a totally new research field, right? And how many topics do you want to study? Do you want to just concentrate on 2 or 3 specific topics that are closely tied to each other? Or do you want to have a broad interest in different research topics? And do you want to publish your work in journals, like top-tier journals, low-tier journals, or just conferences? Right? So what are you capable of doing in your research projects? And do you need any help? If you need any help, and who do you want to work with, and where you can find all those collaborators to help you finish all those projects. So once you figure out those questions, I think the projects tend to move or go more smoothly. And also, I think depending on who you want to be, and you may also choose different career paths. I think some people may want to be a very prolific and productive scholar, and you may even want to become a star in your research field. So in this case, you probably need to spend most of your time and effort on research, but not all people want to be a star or are capable of being a star. And some of you may have passion for teaching, mentoring, or consulting. And some of you may even want to become an administrator. And for example, I have a Dr. cohort, and he actually is a chief diversity officer in his college of business. And from his day one in the PhD program, he's very clear that he wanted to be a dean of business school, or maybe eventually a provost of a university in the future. So this is a possible career path. And some of you may also want to become journal editors or get involved in the service activities for professional associations such as SIOP and AOM. And there could also be some people who just want to enjoy the flexibility and the balance offered by this profession, right? So what I want to say here is please do not assume that being productive and prolific is only criterion for evaluating success in our field, or only thing you need to consider when you plan your future career. So we actually have many different options, and they all could be very good options. All right, so let me first talk about how to manage and design research projects. I think doing research is very interesting. I like doing research, but we don't do research just for fun. And eventually, I think we want to do a meaningful and impactful project that can be published somewhere. And most of the cases, we publish them in academic journals. But publishing is not an easy process. And for those of you who already got some publishing or submission experience, you know how challenging and sometimes could be very frustrating the process is, right? So to have a top tier publication, you need to have a meaningful and novel idea, and you need to know the literature very well, and you need to write the paper logically, have very good design, have high quality data, and know how to use a property analysis, right? And in the review process, you need to be experienced to deal with all those comments. And even though you could do all of these things, and you may still need some good luck to eventually get a paper published. But unless you are a super genius, and I guess we don't have the time and the resources or the energy to do all of these things for all of projects by ourselves. And probably you could be a thought leader and you have a very good, very interesting idea, and you know what you want to do. And you may also know the literature pretty well, or you can write the paper very well, design the study very well, and you have access to a unique data set, or know how to use sophisticated analysis and to run analysis on the data. But the point is, you cannot do all the things just by yourself all the time. And what we need to do is we need to form a team. Form the team with complementary skill sets. And together, you are more likely to complete the project and get it published in a journal. I think this could also be the case for the grant application or research funding application. You need to set up the team, make sure you have the experts on different aspects. And even for your dissertation, you need to understand what you can do and what kind of help you need from your advisor, committee chair, and other committee members, okay? So here I give you 3 examples of my own publications when I was doctoral students. And the first one is my first top tier publication. It was a meta-analysis of HR system. So I was interested in the topic. I read a lot about this topic, but I did not know how to conduct a meta-analysis at that time. So I took an independent study from the 4th author, and who is actually a professor of the School of Social Work. And then my advisor, who was the 2nd author, helped me revise the paper and taught me how to go through the review and the revision process. And the 3rd author had some experiences with meta-analysis. She had published meta-analysis before and provided some help with the coding, analysis, and the revision. And then I have learned how to conduct a meta-analysis. So for the term paper of a micro HR seminar taught by Patrick McKay, who is also my mentor, and I have learned about the concept of job embeddedness. So I decided to do a meta-analysis of this topic for my term paper. And I knew this construct was proposed by Tom Lee and Tara Mitchell. I think it would be extremely helpful if I could have them as co-authors. So I reached out to the 2nd author, who was a student of Tom and Terry at UW. So I showed them the potential of the project. Unfortunately, they were willing to work with me. And the next one is an example from the personnel psychology. Is a personnel psychology article included in a special issue of corporate social responsibility. And the first author was expert on the topic and interested in the topic. And the 2nd author, you can see she's actually from the company where we collect the data and offered a very unique data set. And I was involved in the project to just help analyze the data, even though the topic was not my primary interest. So these are 3 examples of how I found co-authors and formed complementary author team to get paper published. But sometimes having the right skill set is only the first step. And you may also need to motivate your co-authors and do some coordination work to move the project forward. So when you lead a project, you try to select your co-authors carefully, which means you need to consider their work ethics and their availability in addition to what they are capable of doing. You also need to clarify your expectation on them, like what do you need them to do and when you need them to get things done. And finally, it's important to be very proactive and constantly check the progress of the project to make sure that the whole team can meet the critical milestones on time. But when you are just a team member of a project, and you also need to understand what you are expected to do and try to be responsive and try to be responsible and try to be a co-author you want to have in your projects you lead. Okay, so these are what I want to share about how to manage specific research project. And now I'm going to shift attention to how to manage your career paths in general. So first of all, I want to say that academic career is a very long journey. I have received my PhD for 8 years, but I still feel that I have a lot of things to learn every day and keep thinking what the next step is for my own career. But for a doctoral student, I think I would suggest first thinking about what kind of academic life you want to have in at least 10 years. I guess most of the program would expect the graduate to become a prolific scholar who strives for professional recognition through the publications or other scholarly contributions. But publication is only one thing that defines our profession. And we also need to teach, need to do some service work, do something else, and enjoy our life, right? So if we overemphasize the importance of doing research, it may indicate a lack of attention to other aspects. So my first suggestion, I guess most of you are at the PhD stage. So my first suggestion for managing your current career path is to find the one that fits your skill sets and your interest. And I think this is very important because you want to find a place you want to work for a relatively long time. And once you establish your career goal and try to think about how you can end up with the job you want to take. You need to recognize your strengths and weaknesses and see how to better prepare yourself to take those job opportunities. So ideally, you can have multiple options rather than take the only one left to you. But in order to do so, or in order to have those options to choose from, and you probably need to work on your research because I think for doctoral students, your publications will send much stronger signals about your scholarly capabilities than teaching and service. And also for your stage, you may not have many opportunities to teach or to do those kind of service. Okay. All right. So after you found your first academic job, and hopefully all of you found good jobs, the job you dream of, and then you need to start to build your research stream as an independent scholar. So usually, I think if you can publish 3 to 4 related papers on one topic, and each progressing to dig deeper, and you can quickly establish your reputation in your particular research field, and people start to know what you can do and who you are, and they may invite you to present in conferences or seminars, and you start to join the conversations and build connections. And the feeling is like you get the invitation to join the party you always dream of. At this stage, I believe doing research is still the top priority for most of you because you still feel the pressure of midterm review or tenure review. But when you have time, you can also start to explore other opportunities to make bigger impact in the future, such as volunteer to review for journals or do some service work for AOM or SciOp. And this kind of experience may give you a different perspective to understand what you can do in the future. And then we go to the next stage. I guess this is where I just started. And I don't know if I'm ready to share my experiences with you in this stage. But basically, this is what happened after you got your tenure, especially after you become full professor. But what I can see is I think there are actually more options in this stage. And some people may continue to do research and try to think about what legacy we can leave to the world. and you can focus more on the mentoring doctoral students, or you may think about become a department chair, associate dean for a college, and you can do some consulting work. You can also write textbook or some scientific popular books, or you may even consider retiring early as a scholar and start a totally new career. So I recently just heard that one of my role models in the field has left the academic field and started a new career, which is very inspiring. All right, so this is what I want to share today for research project and career paths. And if you have any questions, I will be more than happy to answer them in the discussion part. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was really interesting and detailed explanation of how to approach this. I think I learned a lot, and I really appreciated how you highlighted those 3 different papers, and your role on those different papers fluctuates depending on how central you are to the leadership or how to be a good team member. So if anybody has any specific questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. If not, let's go ahead and move on to our next speaker, Laura Sunday. And I don't know if you're going to share your share a screen or just chat.
I am going to share my screen. Can you see it?
Yes, there we go.
Okay, good, awesome. I loved what Kaifeng presented on, and in some ways it's very complementary to what I'm going to present on. So there's some kind of parallels to what we're saying, and then some complementary topics as well. So my name is Laura Sunday. I'm an assistant professor of organizational behavior at UNC Chapel Hill at Keenan-Flagler. And I'm a recent graduate of the University of Michigan Management and Organizations PhD program, a very recent graduate. I'm a qualitative researcher. I study the meaning of work and meaning-making processes. So I primarily use ethnographic and interview methods, although I do have some mixed methods papers. And in thinking about why I was invited to be a part of this panel, I think it's because I recently completed a large dissertation that included 2 years of ethnographic work following a social movement, over 140 hours of field work and 85 interviews with 55 people. So the agony and the ecstasy of large projects is very fresh in my memory right now. But I am very early stage in my career, so consider that when you're thinking about the advice that I'm giving here. So the topics for today that I want to cover are, I want to talk about 3 challenges in managing a large research project. Some of them are specific to the dissertation or qualitative work, but I think most of them are applicable widely to the different types of projects that all scholars take on. And those 3 challenges are dealing with ambiguity, maintaining momentum, and then bouncing back from setbacks. I'll dive into very briefly, I'll talk about some specific tips for large qualitative projects, and then I'll end by talking a little bit about designing your career path or not designing it. So the first challenge that I mentioned is dealing with ambiguity. Conducting research, especially dissertations, can be a very ambiguous process. There was a meme that went viral on the internet recently where someone was comparing, advisors telling PhD students how to write a dissertation to this, how to draw an owl. And it says step 1, draw some circles, and step 2 is draw the rest of the owl. And sometimes as an early scholar or a PhD student, it can feel that way. You have all these wonderful, beautiful examples of a job well done, but you don't necessarily have a clear understanding of how to get there. So many seasoned academics have the curse of knowledge, and so it can be hard to get going with a new project. So why so much ambiguity in what we do? Beyond just an experience, we're on a quest for novel insights. That's largely what our field is about. And so almost by definition, a well-trodden path will not get you to the new understandings that you seek. People cannot give you a recipe to those novel insights that you want to reach, because you're trying to do something that's hopefully a little bit different than what anyone has done yet. Also, research standards are ever evolving, and people have different ideas about what constitutes valuable research. So there are a dizzying number of approaches you could take with your work. And so it can be very hard to take that first step because it requires making some decisions for yourself. Also, research takes place in a messy, ever-changing world. So we all learned this collectively last year, but external events or unexpected findings, null results, all of these things can completely alter your course with a project. Inductive work is especially ambiguous. So with inductive work, we're taking observations and building theory from the ground up. So it can be, it's not synonymous with qualitative work, but a lot of times qualitative work is associated with inductive research methods. So your research question can change, your informants can change, your coding structure can change, your interpretation can change. And so all of this means that your theory can change right until the last moment of a project. So to be a qualitative researcher, you really need to embrace the ambiguity of the territory that you're entering. So all of this to say, research is not paint by numbers. The only way to eliminate all the ambiguity in your project would be to replicate someone else's work. And usually when we're taking on a big new project, we don't want to just replicate. And so if you were to replicate someone else's work, you would take out some of the joy and creativity, but you would also minimize your chance of making a contribution to the field. So what can be done though about all this ambiguity? Because it's frightening, we don't like it. In general, humans do not like uncertainty. So these are a few things that have helped me. First is finding a topic you genuinely care about. I think this is especially important for the dissertation. And it's almost, you know, trite advice. We say it so much to each other and to ourselves, but I think one of the reasons that this continues to be advice that is spouted at these types of events is because it can be really hard to listen to your own voice when there are so many different opinions in the field. I looked at what Dorothy presented last year at this event, and I noticed she had a slide where she showed all the contradicting advice she received on conducting research. And it's true, you'll get a lot of different opinions about how to conduct your work. So I think it's better to just pick something that resonates with you. You'll have an easier time defending your work. And it will help sustain you through the long haul. Pointless work really vexes the soul for anyone who has had the misfortune of having to do work that you really didn't like at all. At the same time, don't build it up too much. So I'm speaking out of two sides of my mouth here. I think it's important to pay attention to what you find interesting. But at the same time, I think you can enter decision paralysis where no idea seems good enough. And that's no good to you either. So, you know, I had this kind of humbling moment during the throes of my dissertation when my aunt called me and asked me, you know, how's your school project going? And you know, on the one hand, you want to correct them and say, well, it's not a school project. It's kind of, you know, like my identity. It's my life's work. I'm trying to build a career on this. And yet at the same time, for however big and consequential our work seems to us, at the end of the day, most of the world will not read what we're doing and they won't know how it went. So go with something that you're really excited about and know that if it crashes and burns, like there's still a place in the universe for you. You know, this is, you don't need to build it up to the point that you can't actually complete the dissertation. The second thing that helps with ambiguity is to minimize unnecessary ambiguity. And I think the research methods division does an excellent job at helping people through this. So you might not know the final form that your research project is going to take, but what can be really clear is the tools that you're going to use. So if you're on the boat navigating uncharted waters, at least you can know the boat that you're operating and the sails and how that functions. So, you know, seek out experts, learn from them. Karma is really, really helpful for that. The research methods division, AOM, PDWs, books, seminars, all of those things can be really useful. Take papers and dissertations that you admire and try to reverse engineer them. Ask your chair for exemplars. That can sometimes cut through. When you're not quite sure what they're asking for, ask for examples, and that kind of helps get you on the right path. And you can also create a rough timeline. Deadlines, you know, we're notorious as academics for shifting and moving deadlines, but I think it's still important to set them. It forces you to work backwards and really land the plane and see how things are going to get done. And then communicate those deadlines to the relevant people. And then the third thing is accept that some ambiguity is inevitable and even desirable, as I mentioned. You know, try to cultivate that Buddhist don't know mindset, surrender to some of the unknown. Be open to new avenues for your research project, especially if you're doing inductive work. Reframe the uncertainty if you can. You know, I wasn't always good at this. I think during the pandemic, that was really like challenging for me to maintain a positive attitude about it. But it's good to be uncomfortably excited, as Larry Page from Google is always saying to his employees. Try it as much as you can to kind of train your mindset. A second challenge that I see in large research projects is maintaining momentum. I think everyone struggles with this at some point. Our timelines are long, years, sometimes decades. There will likely be moments when you want to quit a project, especially at the writing stage. And that's why I said, picking a topic that interests you is important, and yet it's also not always going to be enough. You're not going to wake up every day feeling, or at least this is not how it works for me. I'm often very passionate at the beginning of a project, but there are middle days in between where I don't necessarily feel that passion, but that's where your routines and your discipline can really help you push forward with the project. So overcoming writing resistance, some things that I've found to be useful is to try to stop the spiral of self-loathing. So I think a lot of academics tend to be very conscientious and high achievers. And so when we don't meet up to our very high standards for ourselves, there tends to be, this emotional aftermath from that. And then that can turn into a spiral where it's difficult to get yourself in a good state of mind, a peaceful, tranquil state of mind where you can actually do some work. So whatever you need to do, if you need to form some kind of ritual, go for a run, beat yourself up for 5 minutes, but forgive yourself for the writing you wanted to do but didn't do, so that you can now do the writing that you need to do in order to meet your deadline. Set small daily page goals for your writing, be disciplined about it. So it's better to make small progress every day than to save and tell yourself that you're going to do a writing blitz. There's actually data on this. People who say that they write in large chunks actually write less than people who write every day. So stop when you reach your goal. So in some ways, we're always doing operant conditioning on ourselves. If you languish at your desk on days when you have writer's block, and you also stay at your desk all day when the writing is going well, you're kind of teaching your body that no matter what you do, you're not going to give yourself a break. So you have to find a way to get out of that pattern. And then be okay with really, really rough drafts in the beginning. Like I said, set page goals. I think time goals, they work for some people, they don't work for me. When I say I'm going to write for 2 hours, I just procrastinate until 2 hours is up. If you're having trouble getting started, anything you can do to cut down on the blank page. So write out the section headings, write the methods section, which is usually the most straightforward. You can try outlining methods. There's all different kinds of tricks that people use to kind of get past that daunting empty page. And then try to let go of perfectionism and find people who you can send ugly drafts to. There are so many gifted people in this field who really know, even with early stage work, they can see the potential and they know how to be honest, but do it in a constructive way. Try to find those people and try to be that person for other people as well. We need people who will be honest with us and tell us when something isn't good, but you also don't want to get your spirit crushed in the beginning of a project when it's inevitably going to be messy. Here are a few books that helped me. I think we can send out these materials later so you can take a look. The middle one is particularly good for qualitative researchers. And the people who helped me, I can't emphasize enough that these large projects really take a village. Kai-Feng made this point with talking about building out teams that can kind of help you compensate for the areas that are not your strengths and where you can kind of contribute. On a dissertation, you are the lead author and the solo author in most cases. So that community comes in the form of, your chair, your committee, your writing groups, your accountability buddies, and then friends who kind of keep you balanced. There's also a paper on gig workers and workers in the gig economy that came out in 2019 from Giampiero Petriglieri and Sue Ashford and Amy Resneski. And I think their insights are applicable to our large research projects. A lot of academic work is very similar to gig economy work in that you're in these kind of unstructured environments and you have to create the structure. So you can create your own holding environment is what they called it, by creating connections to places, people, routines, and purpose that can kind of help you manage the emotions of our research and remain productive, even as you're a little bit adrift from the normal structure of a more traditional work environment. So then a third challenge that I have noticed in large projects is bouncing back from setbacks. This is something that we all have to learn how to do. We often come face to face with our own psychological vulnerabilities in these long research projects. So they become not only intellectual challenges, but also emotional ones. Maybe this isn't true for everyone, but this is true of most of the people that I've co-authored with and worked with, and with my own experience. So, we all have to deal with self-limiting beliefs, the need for constant validation, the fear of uncertainty, desperately holding on to our plans. We have to kind of learn how to deal with these in the course of a long project. So staying healthy during these large projects, you're playing the long game. So exercise, good nutrition, adequate sleep. I think a lot of people rely on counselors and prescription medication. That's fine. There's no shame in that. And so, you don't want to treat this like a sprint, because it's a marathon that you're running. Make sure you take time to address, other parts of yourself, and express those other parts of yourself, your physical self, the social self, the spiritual self. And then keep things in perspective by spending time with people who are not academics, and they can remind you that there's more to than this one project that you might be obsessing over. Negative feedback, this is another type of that can feel like a setback, even if it's the thing that ends up propelling us forward. When you get negative feedback, I think it's useful to ask, what is this person trying to teach me? Who is the source? Are they a reliable expert? Do they have my best interest in mind? Most of the time it's yes. Do I agree with the feedback? So setting aside any emotions, do I think the person's making a valid point, whether it's a reviewer or a committee member? Do I understand the feedback? Do I need to ask for clarity? And then assume good intent. And this can be really hard if the feedback is not delivered constructively. It can be really hard to give that person the benefit of the doubt. But it's really helpful if you do. Then you can kind of take the gems from what they're trying to teach you and make your work all the better for it. And I think you can kind of form a game out of it, or at least I really delight in winning over people who might not have liked the first version of my work. I feel like it's extremely meaningful to go back to that person and say, here's what I did, or here's what I took from you, and to then gain their approval, I think can be really meaningful. Self-affirm as you're going through these projects, tell yourself that you're doing a good job, because you probably are, and do a reality check. You're new at this. It's normal to make mistakes. It would be weird if you weren't making mistakes. And then try again as soon as possible. I think it gets harder to get back on the horse the longer you ignore a draft. Worse than negative feedback can be not receiving any feedback at all. I think that this can be particularly challenging for graduate students. This was not an issue for me. I have to say, I had this awesome committee. They gave me lots of feedback. They were really quick with turnarounds, but I know a lot of people that dealt with this issue, so that's why I included it. You may need to be proactive and initiate a kind, not, super aggressive, because there might be reasons why they're not able to get that feedback to you, but also being candid with people about what you need from them. Too much feedback can also be an issue. So your paper, after too many revisions, it can start to lose the coherence that it once had. And so I think that this is particularly challenging. At least I found this to be challenging at the early stage of my career that I'm in, is knowing when to kind of stand your ground or when to concede and make changes, and making sure that you still have that unifying vision toward the end, so it doesn't look too disconnected. There can be other types of setbacks, pandemics, health issues, family problems. These things happen. This is life. You can't predict or prevent them. I know that's scary to accept, but I think the best remedy is to focus on process, not the outcome. Develop those loving relationships with people you can rely on to get you through those times. Again, affirm your own resilience, that you're strong and you'll get through whatever it is that you're going through, and remain adaptable and open to new possibilities. I have a few specific tips for qualitative projects. If there are people on the call who want to talk more later on, I'm happy to do that. But specifically for qualitative projects, I think in the beginning, it's important to lay the groundwork for the project as soon as possible so you can get into the field. So Irb Approval, this actually, it took me 4 months to get approval for my dissertation. And so it can significantly delay a project. Site access, make sure you get that, and make sure you pick a context where it's not going to be a constant battle or where your access is going to be revoked. That can really kill a project if suddenly they decide they don't want you studying them anymore. In the field, it's really important to be present, be open, and to look for disconfirming information and variants. So don't cling too much to your own early ideas of what the context is about. Listen and care about the people you are studying. There's a counseling technique that's used in couples counseling where couples have to repeat verbatim what the other person said right after they said it. But I actually feel like it's an excellent exercise for qualitative researchers as well. Most of the time we walk around, I include myself in this, we listen to maybe 50% of what the other person is telling us. And most of the time that's enough to get through the day and collaborate. But when you are trying to understand meaning-making processes, you need to catch everything. And so it can be a good exercise to try to get as close to verbatim as you can at recalling specific instances. If you're doing it right, it's exhausting. It's meaningful, but it's exhausting. So I don't ever schedule more than 2 interviews in a day unless I have a big break in between, because if I'm really listening to everything they're saying, so that I know what I need to do for follow-up questions and probing, I'm tired at the end of it, mentally tired. Disconfirming information can be frightening, but it's where the most interesting insights come from. Be willing to kill your darlings. So that's like that phrase that they use a lot in creative writing, but it's true here too. If you look at your theoretical model and it doesn't do justice to what you're seeing in the field, scrap it and start again. Strive for prolonged engagement. This is a trade-off. This is something we can talk more about this in the Q&A, but the method that I chose for my dissertation requires a lot of time to collect the data, and there are trade-offs there. There's no quick publishing for it because I have to spend so much time in the field. But I do think that that's why I was able to reach some of the findings that I was able to reach for, was because I was in the field for so long and establishing those relationships and watching people over time. I think it's helpful to join or create a writing group with other qualitative scholars who can give you feedback and help you kind of endure the fog. And as much as you can, avoid social comparison. I think in graduate school, it's really tempting to do this. Early career scholars, you're looking side to side to try to figure out what you should be doing. But a lot of times, the answer is not outside of you. And so this is especially true for qualitative research. It's still a minority method in the field. And there's different ontological assumptions that you're making when you do a qualitative project. So your approach might look different, and your career path might look different. Your CV might look different than the people who are next to you and in the same program. It doesn't mean that you're not going to end up, both being well-respected academics. So then in designing your career, I guess I have a little bit different of a take, which I'll get to in a moment. But for post-graduation goals, play your own game, but be aware of requirements and trade-offs of what's being rewarded in different environments. The great news is that I still feel this way. I do think a PhD can open many doors, both inside and outside of academia. I know there's a lot of disillusionment right now with the PhD, a lot of people feeling like there's some broken promises in terms of career paths. But I do think the world needs more people who are able to bring the skill set that we've been trained to have into the world in different parts of the world. Just maybe we need to be a little bit more expansive in terms of what doors we're thinking about. Be honest with yourself about what makes you happy. Research, teaching, service, the balance can be really different depending on where you go. Personally, I like both research and teaching, but my own pandemic strategy was to cast a wide net and then decide. Culture was also really important to me. I wanted to go someplace where I felt like I could thrive. It's perfectly fine if you decide academia is not for you. It really doesn't mean that you aren't motivated or smart enough. There can be a slew of reasons why that might be a good decision for you. Two of the people I most respected in my program, who I felt were much smarter than me, ended up leaving the program to pursue other things, and they're very happy with that decision, and it was the right decision for them. But yeah, I think it's okay. It's okay if you decide it's not the path for you. And then the last thing I'll say is that, most modern career paths aren't linear or predictable. I think it's much better to develop skills you're interested in and your own character. So often that kind of falls to the wayside when we talk about our development, but just focusing on being a better person and developing skills that matter to you, those will always be transferable. And then also try to divorce your self-worth from your salary and save for that rainy day. Luck kind of comes and goes, and it's not always a good measure of how you're doing or how valuable your work is. So just in my own experience, I graduated, the first time I graduated from undergrad, it was during the Great Recession. So my first job was actually waitressing. I could not find a job. There were no jobs in Michigan. And then I worked as a nonprofit worker in Guatemala for a while, doing very meaningful work, being paid very little. Then I worked at Google for a while in the States and then abroad. Then I decided, I wanted to go back to grad school. I wanted to spend more time writing, did some advocacy work. And now, I'm an assistant professor. So actually only my last transition was the one that might've been a little bit more linear, but everything else was kind of all over the place. And like I said, that was just trying to adapt to the conditions at the time and the opportunities that were available to me. But yeah, it can be scary to say, I'm not necessarily always going to be in the driver's seat of what happens to me. But I think, again, if you can just kind of trust that you've got lots of skills, if you're in a PhD program, you're pretty smart, and you can kind of endure those troughs. Okay, that's all I have. I think I went way over. I'm sorry.
That's okay, I'll run short.
Yeah, I think that was such great advice. I really appreciate all the kind of mental tricks that you listed there. This is great advice for anybody at any stage of, I just got tenure and I still need to hear all of this stuff. But I also kind of wanted to borrow your slides and show them to first-year PhD students that are incoming. Tim, you're up next, and everyone please keep putting your questions for the presenters in the chat, and we'll get to them after Tim's presentation when we do our kind of open discussion.
Okay, let me take a little bit of time just real quick to say that I'm going to approach this a little bit differently. So I'm going to talk and basically tell stories for 3 large projects, and I mean big projects that I've been running. And the reason I wanted to do this was I don't have a lot of good advice to give. And so I figure if we talk through these, then maybe you'll get some ideas, you'll get some thoughts, and then come with questions and things afterwards. So let me go ahead and just get started. So real quick, a little bit more about me. So 2017, I graduated from UGA in strategic management. I'm an assistant professor, Donnelly Fellow here at the University of Notre Dame, study executives, social approval assets, and AMJ, SMJ, Journal of Management Studies, Florida Environmental Law Review. I love big projects. It's, it's one of those things that just gets me excited. And if you know me, sometimes I think it's a fault that I love big projects so much. And we'll get to why that might be a fault here a little bit. But I just get super excited about thinking about what is it that people can't do? Like what literally can they not do? And what would they do if they could? And then that's what I end up focusing on. And that's what I have a lot of fun. So I have my research domain, and then my whole thing that I love focusing on is, all right, if somebody had all the capabilities in the world, what would they do? And then I'm trying to do some of that. So the plan for the talk, I'm going to talk through 3 examples. As we go through, you're going to see 3 factors that I've learned to care about with these. I'll hit a few lessons learned. I made a bunch of notes of things that haven't worked for me. I didn't feel like putting it in a slide because I don't know, writing it down feels really bad to say, all right, here's all the things that I've messed up so far. So I've got written notes for that. Like Dorothy said, put questions in the chat, and then that should help for a lively discussion. So the 3 examples, one is a deep learning investigation into upper echelon theory. This is a large scale experiment that we've been running, lab study that we've been running for 4 years now. A biometric lab is the second one, a biometric lab that I built from scratch. It was well, in the beginning, I didn't even have a physical space. Now it's in a closet. I'll show you pictures, and then virtual reality development. So we've built a boardroom in virtual reality. And so I'll talk about that. So let's start with deep learning. So deep learning is one of my first projects when I got to Notre Dame, and I started thinking about all the possibilities, and the advice when I got here was kind of, swing for the fences. You've got an okay start. So, take some risk. And so when I've been talking to Don Hambrick and Adam Wowak and others that are really deep into upper echelons theory, the more I started to realize that we haven't tested it at a really fundamental level, like what's happening in the person's mind as they go through this filtering process and decision-making process. And so I started designing this study where we would measure essentially, I mean, it's 404 variables from every participant, measure everything we can, all these constructs from empathy, psychosis, gender, communalism, you name it, we measured it. And basically I surveyed the top strategic management people in the field, and I said, hey, if you were writing a paper and we can't measure these things from a distance because we can't get enough executives to survey these things, what would you want to measure? And they're like, oh, core self-evaluation, or like self-esteem, political orientation, cognitive ability, religion, religiosity, female socialization. And so I started that list, and I got it down to where a participant could finish it in 30 minutes. And it was a hard 30 minutes of about 35 pages worth of surveys. That was so tiring. We give them a 24-hour break, and then they come back in and they do a business case. And we structured the business case such that we can see what it is that the information they click on. How long do they read that particular document for? What do they not look at? After that, we have them write about, what's the situation that they're facing. We have them write about what would you want to do? And then we have a bunch of outcome measures where we say, all right, would you change this strategy? Would you pay the executive more? Would you pay the executive less? So that gave us, researchers that are into strategic change, into CSR, into risk, into exploration, exploitation, into pay, mergers and acquisitions. All of these researchers can then go and take this, what is already a massive data set, and then they can look for relationships on their own. It also helps, if someone studies, for example, narcissism, and then a reviewer comes along and says, well, narcissism is actually correlated with pick your thing. And reviewers don't know, they just throw this stuff out there. And so this data set will be nice for people to go, at least within this sample, yeah, that doesn't exactly hold, so, you might need a better reason to reject the paper than something like that. So at this point, we've collected over 1,000 people in this process. The intention is to use deep learning, where we'll take this set of characteristics, this brain of each individual, and then we'll predict the features of how they describe it. So their perception of the strategic situation. And then we'll use deep learning to predict, all right, well, how is it that they describe their intended strategy? And then we'll take it and we'll say, okay, well, can we predict what you would actually do? And the idea then is that, we can show that these steps that have been predicted all along work in a way that's we're not necessarily trying to show that, oh, it's core self-evaluation that runs through this whole thing. No, we're saying we have a mental model, with all these different things, and we can work on doing that. And then we can post the data set publicly so that then other people can go, because if you look, so this is the type of stuff we measure. So there's a lot here that people can get some use out of. So if you're studying narcissism, cool, let's look at narcissism. Do narcissists, perceive that CEOs are paid too much? Do they need to be dismissed more often? Are they investing in CSR? At one point I did the calculation and I don't recall it. There's X number of thousands of different relationships that people can study here. But the challenge is the time it takes to do this, the time it takes to build the software, because it's all custom software that, because we have to track all that unobtrusive data. We have to track what they click on, how long they click on it, have to have it all timed out. We had to set it up so that this was possible to do in 2 30-minute segments. We had to check that we weren't completely fatiguing participants by the time they get to masculinity, femininity there at the bottom. And it takes, I'm almost done with the data setup for it, because, you know, and it's thousands of lines of code, because every single one of these scales, it's like 400 and something variables. I have to process it, and it's, you know, solo authored work, so it's a beast to wrangle. And so, you know, with this first one, I always say, like, here at the bottom, the project requires a lot of time. I mean, this was not, I knew when I started it, it was not going to be quick, and I'm still going through it. So that's one project I wanted to kind of throw out there. The second one is I'm bringing people into the lab. I'm bringing more executives into the lab, more community members into the lab. And I got to a point where I started thinking, all right, I'm bringing all these people into the lab, and bringing a CEO into the lab is, one, expensive, and two, it's a rich opportunity in order to gather data. And so I started thinking, all right, if I'm going to bring all these people in the lab, how can I maximize my data collection so then I can study things that, again, other people would want to study, but either can't or don't. And so I built a biometric lab here in the business school. We have an eye tracker, so we can look at what people are looking at. We have ability to measure stress and arousal through galvanic skin response. We measure heart rate. We measure facial expression analysis. I can show you a picture. This is what the tiny lab looks like. It's literally, Kaifeng, it was the research assistant lab or whatever over by the elevators. And so it turned into, from a closet into a small research lab. And it's awesome. You know, we're running these studies. We're able to show some of that micromediational process that's happening. You know, if you put someone in this condition, are they more or less stressed out? Are they, you know, do they look away? Are they making eye contact with someone when they talk to them? You name it, we're able to do it. The nice thing here is that this lab, you know, I'm on the fourth or fifth study with it, you know, but in the beginning, it took a lot of time and a lot of money. And it takes a lot of time to run a study too, because you saw it's a closet. We run one person at a time. And then you occasionally get these, you know, snowballs thrown at you like COVID. And my lab is still shut down because being in a closet, you can't socially distance. And so they have this nice sign on my lab door that says, "Do not enter," you know, closed due to COVID protocols. So literally, you know, I had 4 IRBs approved to run spring of 2020, but at spring break, shut down, and none of those studies have still been run. So spent a lot of time, money building this whole thing, and then it's really been put on hold. But the insights are worth it. And the insights, I think, are to the point where we take what's already an awesome study and we go just a little bit beyond what other people are doing or able to do or choose to do. And my hope is that the insights that we gain make that research more interesting and more usable and more publishable. So at this point, I think you can kind of see when I talk big research projects, I mean, we're talking building labs, we're talking software that doesn't exist and collecting on, you know, 1,000 people in these long sessions. The next one I'll talk about is virtual reality. So the biometric lab, we were running these studies where we're looking at how people change their decisions after explaining prior decisions to men versus women. And we were doing it in the CEO context and board context. And every time I'd present the research, people would be like, yeah, that's interesting, you know, from a dyadic perspective, but, you know, what about the whole board of directors? And I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do here now? I'm studying gender in the boardroom. You know, right now, typical board has 11 people on it. 2.8 right now, I think, is the mean for females on a board. And so we don't have enough variance to be able to understand this in the way that I like. For example, we don't have all female boards of directors. We don't have very many, if any, chairwomen of the board. Can you imagine an all minority board? I mean, these are things that are very important for us to think about, but we literally don't have the technology to do it. And so we've been building a virtual reality setting where, and these are pictures from it. So, I mean, this is what the actual boardroom looks like. And at the bottom left, those are what the actual directors that we're using look like. We use high-end virtual reality equipment, and we have basically built the same procedure that we were running in a biometric lab with a flat screen. We've built it now into virtual reality. So instead of you sitting there explaining the flat screen, you have the headset on, it's room scale. So literally if you stood up and walked around, you could walk through the room. The directors, when you're explaining a decision, they'll look at you, they talk, it's spatial audio. So like if you look away, you hear them that way. There's road noise in it so that then, it feels more realistic because there's a city outside the window. You don't expect it to be perfectly quiet. And so the first experiment that we just finished, we collected on almost 300 students. Again, we couldn't bring community in because of COVID, but we were able to run students, and we had a 6-person board of directors plus a chair, and we were able to manipulate it from all male to all female, and male chair, female chair. And so, we used artificial intelligence for the voice generation. So there's no judgment in the voice. It's all kind of flat. But this I needed a partner for. So Mike Villano is a professor in psychology. He studies, uses, and teaches video game design. So it was kind of serendipitous that he and I met, and we just have so much fun working together and doing this. But without him, I would be completely lost. At this point, I've learned enough to be dangerous and help. But he's literally an expert on this. And so this one takes a lot of time, right? You have to develop literally a video game. I mean, that's what we're doing. We have Likert scales that people use, like a laser pointer in virtual reality to make selections. We have a state machine running all the animations for the characters, the development of the character, the body, the lip syncing for the voice, so it actually looks like they're talking. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of money. The entire virtual reality setups are very expensive. We bring community members in now and CEOs in now with it, and then it takes the right people. So in the first project, it took a lot of time, not as much money. Second project took time and money. And this one, it takes time, money, and the right people. But that kind of gives you, I think, a sense for the size of projects that I like. So those, when I think about it, three big success factors: time, people, and money. A few lessons that I've learned. So have a mix of projects. This is one of my faults, is that I like big projects. All right. Yeah. But big projects take years to run, and you still have to be publishing in those years. I was fortunate to come in with an okay, strong record. So I've had a grace period, but my grace period's running its course here now. So, and always work on the one that's closest to publication. Know what's expected. So if you're interviewing, soon, if you're not already, know the tenure requirements, know what they are. It frustrates me when people talk about tenure requirements as though, like they're unfair or anything like this. You interview at a place, and unless they lie to you about tenure requirements, you know what is expected coming in. So the game that you signed up to play. But that's my strong advice: is know what's expected of you when you come wherever you're going. So here we it's not just a numbers game. We have to have independence, quality, and quantity, and we have to have a theme. And if you're missing one of those, you're not going to get tenure. So it's not just a number counting game. And teaching here's a big part of our evaluation as well. And so if you don't like teaching, you've come to the wrong place. But they're very explicit about that. Which is why a lot of these are solo author, 2-author, max 3-author things, is because that independence theme at Notre Dame is so important. So know what's expected, and if you have the ability to take risks, I would recommend starting a project to take only one of the three. So time, money, or team. It's a lot to do those. Some of the things that I didn't feel like writing down on a slide. So don't do as many things as I'm talking about now, right? You get overloaded, and it takes a lot of time to manage all those different things. And so I had too large of a plate for a very long time, and that was more spinning plates than actually getting things done. Recognize that some of the big projects don't work. So the second biometric study that we ran, it took 3 months to collect the data, one person at a time. No results came out of it, nothing, and while I'd love for our field to be able to publish null results right now, that's a nice thought, but it's not really going to work in terms of publication. So just plan that. And again, that's why I think you need a mix of projects. Not, if you look at what's published, not every project that published is a large project. A lot of them are just small, medium-sized projects that people write up really well and they execute solidly. So it's, they're very good studies, but they're not these massive collections. These projects take so long that the literature changes from the time that you start to the time you get ready to write it up. So one of the biometric studies looks at corporate social responsibility. And when I started it, there were in top journals, there were practically no experiments in social responsibility. When I submit that to journals now, they're like, yeah, but how do you extend this other person's research? Like, I don't, it didn't exist when I started this. And so I started replicating their work and showing that none of it holds and trying to put that in the paper to say, oh, and by the way, this stuff you keep pointing at me to do, like, it doesn't actually hold up. So I don't know what they did, and that doesn't, nobody wants to publish that stuff. Nobody wants to be like, oh, right, that's the guy that showed that this other work doesn't work anymore. So know that, avoid the social comparisons, I think, is one of the best pieces of advice, especially if you're going to do something different. So I sit and I watch colleagues that are, everybody in here were so successful except me, and they all the time, they publish, and I'm here like working on these big things, and so my timeline is somewhat different. And so it's, my department head, the prior one, Craig Crossland, used to always send out a weekly email, which was extremely humbling when a department can send out a weekly email about here's all the great things all these people are doing. And I'm sitting here looking at it going, man, I wish I could be in that. That'd be really nice, to be in that weekly email. So that kind of lives. And then I had blank happens, written down. And I think COVID is the big one there. I mean, I built that whole biometric lab. I learned psychophysiological research. I learned all these things. And then it shut down. I mean, it shut down, and they extended the tenure clocks, and the dean came to me and said, a lot of the people in college, do archival work, and not coming into the office actually helped their productivity. He said, you're the one that actually got hosed by this, because your lab, 16, 17 months now, it's been shut down. And, it took me a long time to build it. So it's not just the time it shut down, but that whole time up on the front end was wasted as well. And the problem there is that those biometric studies are the last ones before I'm going to submit, because you don't want to do it first thing, because you don't know if it's going to work. So you test it on mTurk and you test it on Prolific and you build everything up. And so those four papers there are literally just waiting until I can collect data again. And so you just have to be particularly careful of that. And then other people will generally not know what you're doing. So my dad still calls publications in magazines. And so just always recognize that it's you're publishing in magazines to most people. And so social comparisons and trying to get other people to relate, don't even try. So I think that's it for me. Pause for questions. Thank you. I hit 20 minutes, so I at least tried. Yeah. Hope those stories helped.
Yeah, Tim, that was so inspiring. I'm really happy to hear that you're pursuing all of those big projects. I think so many people take, what is not at all the easy path as well, but like trying to just focus exclusively on those incremental publications. And I think it takes a special perspective to say, no, I'm going to do something really different and big and exciting. And I'm really happy to hear about that. So we have a ton of really good questions from the audience. We'll start with those and then continue to populate the chat window. We've got about 30 minutes left. I've got some questions too. Let's start with one of mine and then we'll go into the audience questions. So just from all three of you, and I don't think this is really something that was touched on in your presentations, but I do think it's something interesting to hear about, is how did you choose the job or position that you're currently in? And I know, Laura, a little bit you kind of touched on this as you did a wide net and then you chose, but didn't necessarily explain that choice. Tim, I thought it was interesting that you said, when you're doing the interview, you can hear what are the requirements of that job. Then how did you say, okay, those are the requirements that I'd like to engage in? So Tim, we want to start with you. And
Oh,
we'll...
want to start with me? Okay, sure. If you asked me in a PhD program, would I be working at a Catholic university in the Midwestern United States? My answer was pretty firmly no. But the advice that I got, was apply widely, but nowhere that you're really not going to go, with the exception of if you can meet really good people. And so, because if you go on a job talk, that's 18, 20 people that are going to come. They're going to listen to your research. They're going to get to know you. And that is invaluable. That's a network that you're going to build instantaneously, even if you don't get the job or you turn the job down. So that was the case here. I mean, Notre Dame, Kaifeng, I came, we very great group of researchers. And so I applied, I got the job talk, I flew up and loved it. Absolutely loved it. The group is great. The politics are very little. The funding is sufficient that I can do these things. There was an extra year on the tenure clock compared to other places. I love teaching. And so having 45% of my tenure decision being teaching, 45 research, 10% service is fine with me. So I left the job talk and I went home and my wife was like, how was it? I said, we got to fly up and we got to see if you can do this, because South Bend, Indiana is not exactly a tourist destination. And so we flew up the next day. We didn't even tell Notre Dame that we were flying up, but we flew up the next day because that was the time we had available. And we both said, yeah, we would try it. Now, we love it. She's opened a small business here but knowing the tenure requirements is you have to know the game you're getting into. And if you don't, that's on you. None of that should be a surprise. Yeah, sorry. I don't mean to be so brutal about it.
Yeah, I think it's really good advice. Kaifeng, what are your thoughts here?
All right, so I come next. So I moved from Notre Dame to OSU in 2017. It actually was a very difficult decision to make because Notre Dame is a very great university and we love the college very much and the culture, the climate, like Tim just mentioned. I still miss my colleagues very much, and especially they have a very cohesive and productive strategy group at the time. So they all do similar research, they collaborate with each other. But I think there are two work-related reasons behind my decision of moving to Ohio State. Because at that time, Notre Dame did not have a PhD program and had no attention to or plan to build a PhD program in the short term. And I know that I wanted to work with a doctoral student at some point in my academic career. So that was an opportunity there at Ohio State. And now Notre Dame started to have a doctoral program from this year, right?
We're recruiting this year to start next year.
They have two programs, one for management, one for analytics. So I think it's a great opportunity. Maybe I even consider going back, you never know. And then my research interest is more about HR, strategic HR. So if you look at other faculty members in Notre Dame and they're doing strategy, OB, but not really about HR. And compared with Notre Dame, OSU has historically a reputation of doing research in industry relation, human resource management. They have Ray Noe, Howard Klein, and Ben Campbell. They all do similar research. And just like Tim's reason, when they fly to Notre Dame, they found a lot of people doing similar research, have similar background. And then when I visited Ohio State, and I found it's a better fit with my research interest, with my long-term career goals. That's the two main reasons related to my move to Ohio State.
Laura, what was your thought here?
Yeah, I think in my case, the pandemic job market for any of you who have been enduring it or are still in it, it's pretty dismal. And so I felt very lucky to have had two job offers, but I don't want to create the illusion that I had, tons of schools to choose from. I was lucky in that both of them were opportunities that I was excited about. And one of them, the one that I accepted in particular, I think would have been a top choice for me had I allowed my mind to even go there. But I think during that job market, I did not even allow myself to really think about, what would be my top schools. I just was focused on, putting one foot ahead of me each step of the way. And it ended up being coming down to a choice. There are a few reasons I went where I did. One of them was the opportunity to work with doctoral students, like Kaifeng mentioned. And another was, this was a choice to be able to continue with my current line of research. The other position was a position that had basically a charge for doing a specific type of research with it. And so I would have had to slightly pivot my career, and it was an exciting direction. I was intrigued by it, but I ultimately wanted to keep going with the work that I've been doing in my dissertation. So that was another part of it as well. But great colleagues, would have had great colleagues at both. So.
Yeah, great point. So a couple of the questions I'm kind of lumping together, but several of the participants put into the chat questions about how do you manage collaborations, and in particular at an earlier stage, like during your dissertation, how do you start branching out to collaborate with people, particularly people who are at a higher career stage than you potentially, I think you had a great example of this in a couple of your publications, that you reached out to people maybe while you were more of a junior researcher who had done similar things, and you were like, you'd be the perfect person to bring into my project. So I guess broadly defined, how did you all manage these collaborations at early/later stages?
Sure. I will start it, and maybe Tim and Lauren can add to that. I think it's important to set up the clear and realistic expectations for your collaborators, especially when you work with senior colleagues and they have done very good work on certain kind of topic, but at that stage, and they may not have enough time, or the time you have, flexibility you have, to concentrate on the research work because they need to find another way to contribute to the field, right? They need to review for journals and do a lot of administrative works to protect the junior colleagues so they can do more research work. So in that case, I would say you have realistic expectations and communicate those kind of expectations to the senior collaborators in the beginning of the project to make sure and they commit to those kind of expectations. They can do their part to move the project forward. So I once got an experience, I reached out to a very famous and senior colleagues in the field, and the person just said directly to me that, and the person just had no time to work on research project anymore. And even though he's willing to offer me some suggestions or comments. So I totally respect, but once you have them on board and try to lead the process, try to do most of the work as a doctor student and junior faculty, and then give them the heads up when you need something from them, rather than just say, I need this in a week. So sometimes I feel doctor students, and they are protected very well by their advisor. And I have some students, they send me something, I get them back immediately. But when you graduate, when you started as an assistant professor, and try not assume your senior colleague will respond to your email as your dissertation advisor, and they have some other priorities. So give some time and for them, and then keep reminding them. And if you unfortunately had very negative experience with those kind of senior colleagues who are not very responsive, like Laura mentioned, no feedback at all, and you just learn from the process and try to avoid working with this kind of person in the future.
So an SMS presentation like this, I think a year ago or 2 years ago, I made the note. I think I just pulled the CV and kind of scrolled through it quick. I have 28 co-authors at varying range from PhD students all the way to the more senior people in the field. A lot of those connections came from my advisors in my committee, and then social events and stuff at conferences. And so, yeah, work your network and find out who's going to help the most. And my way of approach is to always work like I'm first author and be happy to be fourth author. And I think that a lot of people kind of have learned that about me, that I take that approach. And so it's kind of it's good to be known for something like that.
I don't know that I have much to add to this. I think those were, yeah.
So I want to make sure we get to this topic. Laura, you talked about this a little bit. So right now, with the realities of the world, the way it is with the pandemic and job markets being kind of fluctuating, I think maybe I'm incorrect in this assumption, but maybe there's more jobs in the academic market this year than there was last year, but still not bountiful opportunities. So I do want to kind of ask our panelists, what other career paths have you guys considered, and or what advice do you have for folks who are pursuing the academic market specifically right now, given the challenges that people are facing? Laura, maybe we'll start with you because you've already talked about it.
Yeah. So, in some ways, I think my advice, I stand by my advice, but I recognize that it's hard to follow. I think my advice continues to be adaptable and be flexible with your future. I think that there are opportunities out there, but it's not so easy. So many people come into this field with a very specific dream, and it can be so hard to let go of that if it's not panning out. So I say that recognizing that it's not always an easy thing to do. But yeah, so I was with my own job search, I basically took the approach of applying to all the academic positions first, and then I had a list of industry roles or different opportunities I would also pursue if the academic market didn't pan out for me. And I was just about, I think by the time I got a job offer, I had applied to 62 jobs. And I was prepared to continue to apply to more. And so, people take different approaches to it, but if I could find even one aspect of a role that I could get excited about, I applied. If I couldn't, if I knew it was definitely going to be a no, I didn't bother, but I didn't want to waste people's time. But for a lot of things, there was, an angle that I could come at. And then I also connected with other people who were doing qualitative work in really distinct settings. So I met someone who does qualitative research on surgical teams at a hospital. And that's increasingly something that they hire qualitative researchers to do, to understand how to minimize hospital errors and improve collaboration. So I never went down that path, but you never know who you're going to meet. And just listening to people talking about their jobs, there were jobs out there that I didn't even realize that were very well aligned with my skill set that I could have gone down and pursued had the academic path not worked out.
So I can jump in. So I started my PhD in my 30s. I worked 5.5 years in industry, did an MBA, worked 2 years in consulting, then did the PhD. My strongest advice is to go into academia, right? If you haven't worked in industry or consulting and you're looking at industry and consulting, trust me, go into academia. So I'll just throw that out there right off the bat. This is the best job in the world, and so do everything you can. Even if you're at a lower tier school, I still think it's much better than sitting on an airplane, in consulting, or, sitting on an airplane in industry. The other thing that I'll say in terms of finding and getting a job real quick that a lot of people don't talk about is the letter writers for the jobs. Make sure that you manage that process, that you have letter writers identified early enough. You have expectations of what the letters are going to look like. Are you going to send it in? Are they going to send it in? Are you going to see it before it goes in? Is it going to take them a week to write it, 2 weeks? Are they going to be on vacation these days? Because that's the one thing in a lot of applications that holds things up is letter writers. So we don't talk about it enough. So it just came to my mind, Laura, when you were talking. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
All right, so I have not really considered other career paths since I started my PhD program, because Rutgers program has a very strong and clear expectations of the student going to academia. I think when I was there, they have some statistics showing that in total they got more than 50 graduates from the program in the history, and only one went to the industry. So the rest of them all went to academia. So it's in a clear signal to the graduate student that you should go the academic career path. And think for the people who are on the job market right now, and try to think about the fit, and not just to go to the best school you can reach, but try to think about what kind of a life you want to have once you start as an assistant professor, and try to keep the balance between your research and your personal life and teaching and other kind of things, because sometimes the fit is more important than just going to the place everybody wants to go. And if you are early stage, I also encourage you to think about, just try to imagine what kind of school you want to work for when you graduate. And then you start to prepare to do the research that has similar interest with faculty members in those schools, and try to start build some connection at this stage. And this is going to help you to better prepare yourself when you're on the job market. And like Laura, like Tim mentioned, it's better to have some option to choose from rather than end up with the one you only have when you are on the market.
Yeah, all of this is great advice. I appreciate hearing about the kind of alternative career paths, going to industry first, or Laura presenting your, journeys around the world. Another story comes to mind, a real rock star academic in my department here in the psychology department, not affiliated with Academy, but Katie Ehrlich here is, she just won the Early Career Award for APS, for APA. She's got, tons of grant funding to do really interesting stuff from the NIH. And she came out on the job market during the previous recession and struggled to find a job, even with a stellar publication record and an interesting postdoc. And she went and worked for a winery for a couple of years, and then went back on the academic job market, and now is, amazing. So there are many different paths to life success, and that kind of brings us to the next chunk of questions that I'm noticing here, kind of these work-life balance kind of thing. I appreciated your visual that if you blow up one of the bubbles, then you might lose some of the other parts of your well-rounded perspective. So one person says how to hold on to these psychological aspects. Laura, I think it was during your talk. So how do we kind of become committed to treating ourselves like a friend and kind of overcome these barriers? Somebody else says, is there any advice on how to balance family, especially kids, and these dissertations or large research projects? And then also, Laura, we've got a couple people asking for the names of the books that you were referring to. So maybe you could just post those in chat or something.
I'll post those.
Yeah, so I guess just general work-life balance suggestions, other than what you've already said.
You mind if I start real quick?
Oh,
So my wife and I had a kid while I was doing the dissertation. There's no good time in life to start the family. And so dissertation, maybe not comprehensive exams, that seems especially evil. But the big thing is just to know the family well enough that you can say, this is what I need at this time, and this is what I need at another time, and work hard when you're working. And then, I take care of the simple stuff at night, emails, reviews, stuff like that while I'm watching TV with my wife. But when my son is awake, then I'm with him. But my wife opened a small business here. And so she works all morning and all evening. And so basically every day, I'm up in the morning, get them ready, go to school, just like 90% of other people are. But when you're on the tenure track, it feels different than my colleagues that have spouses that don't work, that take care of the kids and all this type of stuff. But everybody faces their own challenge, and you just keep working hard. That's what everybody's trying to do it. We're all trying. And a long time ago, someone gave me the advice, and I don't like it, but maybe someone will. You have your life, your family life, and your work life. Pick two. And so I don't like it, but maybe someone will find it helpful.
All right, I'll jump in. So I think it is really hard to maintain the balance between work and the life, especially when you have the family. And I still remember how stressful I felt when I first got my first kid. Now I have Ray. And I really want to find time for research and to meet my teaching assignments where taking the new responsibility as a parent. But over the years, I think I have learned several things. The first thing is, and you need to accept the changes in your life. And you need to tell yourself, and for certain stages, and you have different priorities. So maybe it's the time for you to allocate more time to your family and to your kids, even though you really want to get other things done. And the second one is, as Tim mentioned, probably you need to change your work routine a little bit and not just work as a doctoral student, a single doctoral student. You have a lot of time, you can sit in the office for 12 hours a day, and try to use the small chips times to do those work together. Another thing is you need to set clear boundaries between your work and life. So when you're at home with the family, with the kids, and try not to worry about your research project, your teaching assignments, and just to have some high quality time with your family, with the kids, but you do communicate well with your spouse or other family members, try to get help from them. So to make sure when you have to work, you don't need to worry about your kids or your family responsibility, or even feel a little bit guilty for not being with them at the same times. So I'm still learning, and I think it's very hard, and just how it is. We don't try to solve the problem at all, and you need to learn how to live with those kind of things over there.
I think for me, I wasn't married and I didn't have kids during the program. So I think in general, that makes things easier. Where it makes it a little bit difficult is, don't always necessarily have the support system there. And sometimes it can make it difficult to actually set boundaries because you don't have dependents that are forcing you to put the work down. You think, well, I might as well keep working. So the other challenging thing about qualitative work is a lot of the people who I'm interviewing, they're only available in non-work hours. So I would be getting up at, crazy times for people in different time zones, or I just did an interview last week from 10:30 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. my time. And so that makes it difficult to have like a structured regular schedule because I put the informants first. Usually, their availability matters more than mine. So those were a little bit tricky, but in general, I have to say, I think I had it easy on that regard. Not that I felt like I achieved balance, but easier for me than most other people.
Yeah, that's all fantastic advice. I got another comment in here. Joe Nixon says, I've heard the advice that while reading is critical for developing research ideas, inspiration abounds in interaction with others, from colleagues, industry experts, etc. I was wondering if you all might share any sources of research inspiration you drew on during your doctoral studies or for the projects you're working on at the moment. That's an interesting question. So if you've had any chance encounters or that kind of thing.
I can jump in on this one. Yeah. My dissertation topic, I changed it early on. I was going to study one context, and then I was boarding a plane and someone had handed me a copy of Money Magazine, which I don't subscribe to, never subscribed to, and I was just reading it to pass the time, and that's where I found my research context. And so, yeah, you never know where those ideas can come from.
My dissertation idea came from Hambrick's 2007 editorial update on upper echelons. Basically, I read one paragraph in there, and I was like, I emailed him. I said, "Are you doing this? Is anyone doing this?" And he wrote back saying, "No, it's too big an investment. Nobody seems to be, wanting to take the time, the money, all this stuff in order to do it." And that sounds good. Let's do that. So that was my dissertation against all recommendation from everybody on my committee. Everybody thought it was a bad idea. So.
Yeah, I think my inspiration mostly came from my advisor and other committee members at that time. And also, I think it came from all the ratings I had from the seminars, because around 2012, 2013 or 11, So multi-level analysis became a very popular thing for management research, and it's very new. It's kind of new for strategic HR. So that's why I try to build my dissertation around that idea and using multi-level approach. And later, I think I got most inspirations from those other people's publications. I read their articles, found it very interesting, tried to learn from them. And if you check my publication record, I started with OBHR's approach to understand strategic HR, and I got a lot of criticism for overlooking the longitudinal effect for conducting cross-sectional designs. So I tried to learn from strategy colleagues and to use archival data, because usually it has multiple years longitudinal data at firm level. So I switched my purpose a little bit and try to get closer to strategy folks. But it's a long learning curve to learn how to use echometrics rather than the psychometrics methods if I want to submit a paper to those journals. Yeah, just read more and you got more inspirations, and try to talk to people you meet in the conferences, and maybe you got new inspirations. And also sometimes it just happens naturally when you work in the new institute. For example, I met NC at Notre Dame, and Anne really promote responsible research, and she is very interested in the giant and big challenge of the whole world, like inequity issues. So I had a separate project about income inequality, so which is totally different from strategic HR research, but I found that this is meaningful. I am willing to devote more time and effort to studying those kind of topics.
Great. Well, we are at the end of our 2 hours. I want to thank Tim, Kaifeng, and Laura for fantastic insights, and everybody give them a round of applause. I'm sure that we will be, so it sounds like our presentation is being recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube, and then the link will be emailed out to all of the participants. I don't want to speak for our wonderful presenters, but they may be willing to answer your emails if you have additional questions.
Please email and ask. You know, we're all available, I think. Well, I am. I don't know about that, but I am.
Yeah, same here.
Great. Well, thank you all, and we hope to see you on Thursday for session number 2.
Thanks so much.